Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have with us in conversation Mr. Gautam Bhimani, and here we present to you Techniche 2016 interviews brought to you by Anchorenza RadioG and CBS.
Mr. Bhimani has been an integral part of the cricket commentary team, and so you have a very important role in the team, and you have to do such a fantastic job. It's never really easy to ease people up in front of the camera and get great responses. So we'd like to know what recipe you use to get them to ease up.
Well, I think the recipe is pretty simple. I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people see you on tour, and especially because cricket takes you to some fun places, and when I go climbing a bridge or eating a lobster somewhere, people are like, that's all you do, you have no work to do, you're getting paid just to go and watch cricket and sightsee. But as you said, there is a lot more to that, a lot more hours that go into that, and I think, to me, I mean, I'm glad you said it yourself, to me one of the biggest challenges is to get the best out of the other person. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. The secret to a non-sports person being a professional broadcaster means that his or her role is that much more important, to see how you bring the sports person out in the best capacity possible. Because 95% of sports people are not good either speaking wise or in front of camera or as commentators. Many of them think they are, but they are not. And I think if you have to look at a recipe, my one simple recipe is to make them smile. And I think that's the best recipe for anything, even if it is about me speaking to an audience, me speaking to the camera. A lot of people have dubbed me the funny man, and I always correct them. I say that, well, I wish I could be a funny man. There's a bunch of stand-up comedians who do a really good job in life, but my only difference is I'd like to think of myself as the fun man, not the funny man, because yes, we are lucky that we are not bringing to you news of a train accident or a plane accident or talking about all those things that maybe a news anchor has to do. This is sport. So even if a team has lost, there's nothing wrong with walking up to a guy who's just been hit for 100 runs in 10 overs and saying that at least you're lucky it wasn't 200. Make him smile, make him feel good about life in some way possible, rather than saying, this is the worst figures ever recorded in the history of mankind. How did you do it? I mean, what's he going to feel about himself after that? Simple.
So like you have this amazing capability of easing people in front of the camera. So we'd like to know, like, what is your most memorable experience with the audience?
Well, there've been lots. I mean, it's difficult to pinpoint one, but I think to me, an interesting one that I always come up with once in a while is when I was interviewing a player's wife, because that's the one thing when you get to see the other side of a player. And I feel sad that not a lot of the Indian players, be it cricket or other sports, they feel it's too private to allow their wives to be interviewed or parents to be interviewed. I mean, there are some sensational news channels who will go ahead and do it anyway. But just purely in terms of getting an insight into the other side of a player, I think some of my best moments have been interviewing players' wives and children and families to try and see another side of them. And one time in Barbados, I was interviewing the wife of a West Indian fast bowler. India were playing West Indies, and Mervyn Dillon's wife basically writes down every single ball that he bowls. She keeps a diary, and she literally writes down every ball, and at the end of the day, they compare notes. And she says, okay, you did this, you were a little down when you went back to the boundary line, you need to change this, you need to do that. So in addition to the coach, he had his wife Sophie's inputs. So I thought, wow, what a great interview. So I went to her and said, listen, you have to give me an interview. And she said, listen, I can't do that. Mervyn's bowling now, and he bowled into Tendulkar. So can we do it tomorrow? So I said, look, it has to be done today because I promised my producer. So she said, okay, look, I won't make eye contact. I have to watch what he's doing. You keep asking me questions and we'll do it. So cameras rolled, started the interview. So I asked her about how it all started. What do you write? Show us the notes. She was like, this is what I write, but she's watching husband bowling. And sure enough, Sachin was at the crease, and it was a big moment for him because he wasn't the biggest name in cricket and he had to establish himself. And halfway through a sentence, I couldn't even see what was happening on the field behind me. Sachin was LBW to Mervyn Dillon. And she went completely berserk. First thing she went is she jumped into my arms. And she didn't know how to react. And all this was recorded on camera, made for great television, all that. My first reaction to that was excellent television, all that is great, my producer will be happy, but Merv's walking towards the boundary right now. and he's seen all this, and he's about 6'7", and I was petrified. But I got a great story out of it. It was great fun and all that. And she said, "Oh, you're a good luck charm. Don't leave, don't leave." I had to, and that evening I met him again. And just to finish off the story, there was a pool tournament that Cable and Wireless, a sponsor, had organized for all the players. So I had also turned up there, lovely party, and it was a great way to have people pairing up and playing pool with each other. So I see Mervyn Dillon walking towards me with a big stick in his hand. And in fact, I didn't know that time it was a pool tournament. I just knew it was a party at the end of the day. And he points the stick at me and saying, "You the man who was interviewing Sophie?" I'm like, "Yeah." My voice also, everything went from it. He said, "Oh, great man, you can be my pool partner." And I was like, phew. There it was, all's well that ends well. But I think it was, I mean, there's always a story behind a story and always a story behind a player that it's nice to bring out.
You have dug a bit into your past, and you visited Singapore and Malaysia back when you came third in a quiz. Okay, so the then director of cricket, ESPN and Star Cricket, Raymond Hume, offered you a position at the channel, even though you had really not much, experience in that field. So we'd like to know that story.
Well, basically, I did mention this in my lecture, so I'll say it to you again in brief. I was just there as a tourist. He didn't know me at all. He knew nothing about me. He just knew I was this one kid who wanted to see how a TV studio works. And the person in between was Harsha. So I knew Harsha from before, and Harsha was hosting a show. I had basically called up Harsha out of the blue saying that, "Listen, can you introduce me to someone in Singapore?" He says, "What a coincidence, I am in Singapore. Why don't you come and meet me? I'll take you to the studio. I am doing a show with Geoffrey Boycott called Boycott Live, and you can hang around and see the studio." I said, "Fine, great." And it was late at night because it was live in India at 11 p.m. and which means 2.5 hours, 1:30 at night in Singapore. So after the show finished, the producer, he gave me a few things to do, like cue the cake that was coming. It was Boycott's birthday, October 19th that year. So I had to cue the cake. I had to make a call to Shilpa Shetty's house to surprise Boycott because all the Australian and English guys didn't want to call up an Indian resident if somebody else picked up who didn't speak English. Yes. So that was my task. Call up, "Shilpa madam hai?" Pass the phone on. Fine. So my 2 jobs were done. After the show finished, Geoffrey was hanging around in the cafeteria. Harsha had some other recordings to do, like anchors do at the end of the show. So Raymond Hume came and told me, "Mate, I'm afraid everyone's really busy, but just give me about 45 minutes more. We'll come and show you around. Only one instruction, do not talk to that man. He's a cranky old man. It's late at night. He doesn't like people. Do anything, just do not even go near him." I'm like, okay. So I sat down one end of the cafeteria, Geoffrey Boycott sitting there, legend of cricket. I'm like, why shouldn't I go and talk to him? I mean, how bad can he be? He can't eat me up. So I went ahead and sat next to him and said, "Hi, Geoffrey." And he's like, words to the effect that can't be used here. "Who the blank are you?" But I still said, look, I introduced myself. I said, "Listen, when you got your 100th 100 at Headingley, it was amazing that you got it in a test match. And that push that you had to get that final run and your reaction." He stared at me. And that was just the beginning. We talked about his debut test match, his everything. It was just me picking up a few moments that I had, remember of his career, making him feel good about himself. Again, coming back to my metaphor for how do you bring out the best in the other person. Yeah, I was told he's cranky. But who will be cranky when you're complimenting them on your 100th century? Who will be cranky if some guy out of the blue, a stranger, remembers exactly how many runs he made on his debut and compliments him and says nice things about him and talks about his home and his father being a coal miner and that stories about his childhood. He was like, "Where do you know all this from?" and things like that. And by the time Raymond Hume came back, we were chatting up a storm. He himself had got me a coffee from the machine because I didn't know how the machine worked. And it was like we were best of friends. And the last 15 minutes of it, he actually eavesdropped and listened. So after Geoffrey left, he was like, "You didn't listen to a word that I said, but there must be some reason why Geoffrey listened to you. Come see me tomorrow morning." And he offered me the job.
That's pretty cool. And you basically hit it off very well. Yeah.
Totally.
So you said you knew Harsha before you went there. So your first project was with Mr. Harsha Bhogle.
No. I just socially knew him. I mean, my interaction with him was because Harsha's first ever commentary stint as a radio commentator was with my dad.
Okay.
So this was in Jamshedpur in 1984. As a young kid, he just wanted to, straight out of IIM Ahmedabad, he just wanted to do cricket commentary because it was his passion. And he talked to a few people and he just went up to my dad and said, can I have this assignment? He had already set it up, but they interacted during his first day of commentary. So ever since then, I knew him socially.
And you worked with him, right? For
Yeah,
Harsa
we worked.
Online, for Harsa Online.
Yeah.
So we'd like to know more about that. How was the experience there and what position did you work in?
Basically, when I joined for the first time, there was no position in television for me as such. I mean, even though Ray was impressed by me and he gave me the job, he didn't know why. Singapore was the hub for all cricket. But Ray had a different idea in his mind. He said, you cannot have Chinese people sitting and editing a package on cricket for an Indian audience. I need to move. And with much opposition from people in Singapore, he actually fought and set up one desk in Delhi. He said, if you're talking cricket and you're talking to an Indian audience, how can I deal with a bunch of people who don't know cricket? So I want to start a team from scratch. So I was the first person, one of the first people he hired. We had a team of about 5 sitting around one desk in Pushp Vihar in Delhi. That was the start of ESPN Star in India. So he gave me he said, listen, the only thing we have on our plate right now, apart from live TV, which is starting in 4 months' time when India goes to Zimbabwe, is a show called Harsha Online, for which we need a researcher. Now, given your ability to think deeper into the game of cricket, I want you to completely head the research team. So it's not, I mean, if the first episode is on Sourav Ganguly, I don't want to know that Ganguly was born on 8th July 1972. We all know that. Or that he went to St. Xavier's School, or that he likes this food or that food. I want to bring out stories that nobody knows. I mean, Sourav was the first episode, it was great because we were classmates in Xavier's Calcutta. So for me, it was like an inside story. And it gave me another 15 days to stay in Calcutta before moving to Delhi. But even if it was not a schoolmate, anybody, it was about finding something interesting about them, going to an interesting friend or a teacher or somebody and getting out a story about them and putting that episode together. So that was the kind of passion he was looking for. And then, I mean, live television followed 4 months later.
So now let's talk about your first book, Reverse Sweep. It is totally based upon your travel anecdotes, right? So we are, kind of keen to see more of your writings. So are you thinking of writing any more stories? And if yes, then what would it be about?
Well, for a start, Reverse Sweep was kind of a book before its time, for the simple reason that when it came out in 2006, it was the pre-IPL era, which meant that that whole new generation of cricket followers hadn't come in yet. It was the pre-Twitter era, which meant I couldn't publicize the book myself on my own. So enough people didn't know about the book. So even though it sold 4,000 or 5,000 copies, it could have sold 50,000 copies. Because for the number of people who say, oh, we know about your book, but we can't find it. Or yes, you've written a book, but can we have it? And I've run out of copies. The publishers run out of copies. So I think my first, and between 2006 and 2015, so much more has happened with better quality pictures, more fun anecdotes. So I think my first objective is to bring out the sequel to it, which will be bigger, glossier, and hopefully will sell more. After that, I'll take it from there.
You also had the experience to experience many of the matches while commentating. So what according to you is like the most nail-biting finishes you had ever encountered?
Well, there have been so many. I mean, it's hard. Ironically, when a lot of people ask me about matches I've literally done ball-by-ball commentary on, those are the matches I remember least about. So when you're that involved in it, and people years later, my first ever test match was India, Australia and Adelaide in 2003. And I mean, obviously I remember the big things about the game because it was India won that test match in Australia. Dravid scored a double 100. He scored a very important 50 in the second innings to guide India to victory in the fourth innings. Agarkar got 6 wickets. But there are so many other things in the match that even though I have a head for numbers, I just don't remember. So for me, I remember more matches that I watched as a spectator and had nothing to do with the coverage than ones I was totally involved with. So I've had too many close finishes to actually recount any one. Maybe the 2007 World T20 final, simply because it was not just a key finish or a nail-biting finish, it had such a far-reaching impact on world cricket. India won that. Then came IPL, then came T20, this whole revolution. So it was sparked off by that one Srishant catch.
We have seen you in the 2007 sports comedy movie Hat Trick, and your appearance made us feel like you really enjoyed it. So we'd like to know if you are planning some future project in the film industry.
I'd love to. I mean, that happened by accident, and it was so much fun because even working in television, the other side of it, the movie side of it, is such a different culture, because television is all about doing it yourself, and you strive for long hours a day, and no matter where you are, you're setting up your own cameras, and you've got one cameraman, you're carrying the tripod yourself, and it's a pain. I mean, it doesn't, whether you're a junior reporter or a commentator, end of the day, if you're on tour, you're still doing that. You don't have 10 assistants with you. You have 0 assistants. Cameraman, you, tripod, bag, check sound, yourself, headphone, all done, all DIY. Whereas in movies, it just, no matter how low budget a movie, you still have a spot boy, you still have somebody waiting on you, and it's a totally different culture. So it's great to experience it once in a while. So if it happens again, I'm waiting.
So we have seen a lot of your touring videos, like when we watch the cricket commentary, we get to see a lot of them. So how did you get the idea of making these touring videos, and like what's the fun part of making them?
Well, the idea basically comes from the place itself. I mean, the whole idea is to pick up a cue from somewhere and you run with it. There's no planning. Obviously, there's research. You need to have the basic facts, but I never do any planning because I like the place to speak for itself. So if I'm in a place where I've never been before, Christchurch in New Zealand or Georgetown in Guyana, obviously I've asked locals where to go, what to see, what to eat, and what to show on TV. But at the end of the day, once you go there and you're sitting on that location, you pick up a cue from some object around you, from something that will actually be the hero of that story. And it could be something that you hadn't planned for in the first place. So those are really things that it's about being spontaneous and finding out at that moment what it is that clicks.
So when you're traveling for these touring videos, can you recount some, or maybe the latest one, any funny or weird experience or moment you had?
Well, there have been so many. I mean, in just going. I mean, the one that sticks to me most is in Australia when we were diving with the sharks for the first time, and I'd never even dived before. So it was Ravi Shastri, Wasim Akram, and me. We were all going down, and I'd never even dived before. And the first time I actually went and tried it out, I was not as scared of the sharks as I was of the water, because breathing underwater is a completely different kettle of fish. I swim, I know how to swim really well, and sometimes that can be a deterrent, because when you go underwater as a swimmer, you're naturally holding your breath, or you're naturally wanting to breathe in that particular way. Whereas you're supposed to breathe as if it's like the way we are sitting here. Just breathe in, breathe out. The tank will do the job. But it's very hard to tell yourself that if you've never done it before. And then on top of that, if you've got a 20-foot shark coming straight at you, you tend to panic. So I lasted exactly 20 seconds down there, and I was taken up at the end of it. And the amount of flack I got from Shastri and Akram that you brought us here, they were my guests on the story. You send us down and you run away, because at the end of the story they were swimming in there, and I was watching them from the outside from the glass, because I had gone up and changed. And the kind of gestures that they showed to me, again, that I can't repeat over here, but again, it made for a fun story.
So for all of us, Gautam Bhimani has been a real success story. So is there something you'd like to share to all of us as the students?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, the lesson is really, as I said, for me, my own mantra for success is to make others smile, and I think it's a truth that applies across in life generally, that if everyone can smile and make somebody around them smile, their self is a path to success. It's not just about television, not just about cricket or sport.
Thank you so much for interviewing. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.